Okay, so have you ever just felt completely stuck? Like
Yeah.
you're staring at this giant to-do list and your brain is just not cooperating.
Oh, absolutely. I think we've all been there.
Yeah, it's like you want to be productive, you need to get things done, but the motivation is just gone.
Yeah, it's like your brain is just stuck in neutral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I came across this program called Dopamine Genius, I was immediately intrigued.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about it.
Well, it claims to use these specific sound frequencies to boost your dopamine levels and help you focus better.
Dopamine, huh? So tapping into the brain's reward system.
Right. And, dopamine is often associated with pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually crucial for motivation and decision making too.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the driving force behind our actions.
Yeah, so I was thinking we could do a deep dive into this whole dopamine genius thing, see if it actually lives up to the hype.
I mean, let's unpack this and see what the real science says.
Okay, so from what I've gathered from their website, they're making some pretty bold claims.
Like what kind of claims?
Well, first of all, they mentioned some research from Harvard, which sounds impressive.
Harvard. That does lend some credibility.
Yeah, but they don't go into specifics about the research itself.
Right, we'll have to dig into that a bit more.
And then there are all these testimonials from people who claim that dopamine genius has transformed their lives.
Oh, really? What kind of transformations are we talking about?
Like increased productivity, better focus, less stress.
Sounds pretty appealing.
Right. They even have a story about this mom whose son was struggling with focus in school. And apparently, after using Dopamine Genius, he's doing much better.
That's quite a claim.
Yeah, so, it's easy to get swept up in all these glowing reviews.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to approach this with a healthy dose of skepticism, too.
Oh, absolutely. We need to separate the hype from the actual science.
Exactly. So before we get too carried away, let's talk about dopamine itself. What it is, what it does, why it's so important.
Okay, great idea. Let's break it down.
So we already touched on this briefly, but dopamine is a neurotransmitter, which is basically like a chemical messenger in the brain.
Right, it helps transmit signals between neurons.
And it plays a crucial role in our reward system.
Right.
So when we do something pleasurable, like eat a delicious meal or achieve a goal, our brains release dopamine.
And that dopamine rush makes us feel good, which reinforces those behaviors.
Exactly. And that's why dopamine is so closely linked to motivation, because we're constantly seeking out those activities that trigger that dopamine release.
It's like a built-in reward system that keeps us going.
But here's the thing. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure. It's also crucial for a bunch of other cognitive functions.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Things like decision-making, focus, attention learning.
Right. And that's what makes this whole dopamine genius thing so interesting. Because if they can actually manipulate dopamine levels through sound frequencies.
That could have huge implications for all sorts of things.
Exactly. So how about we dive into the science behind sound and the brain? Is there any evidence that sound can actually influence our brain chemistry?
Okay, let's explore that. I think it's a good place to start. So, where do you want to go from here?
Well, I'm really curious about this whole brainwave entrainment thing that they keep mentioning on the website.
Yeah, that's definitely worth exploring.
Is that like a real thing, or is it just some kind of marketing gimmick?
It's actually a real phenomenon, but it's often oversimplified and misrepresented.
Oh, so it's not as simple as just listening to some sounds and suddenly becoming a genius.
No, not quite.
Okay, so how about you give us like a crash course on brainwave entrainment? What is it and how does it actually work?
All right, so basically, our brains produce electrical activity, and this activity can be measured in the form of brain waves.
Okay, and I've heard of different types of brain waves like alpha waves and beta waves. What's the difference?
Yeah, so different brainwave frequencies are associated with different mental states. Alpha waves, for example, are typically associated with relaxation and calmness, while beta waves are more linked to alertness and focus.
Okay, that makes sense. So where does the entrainment part come in?
So the idea behind brainwave entrainment is that you can use external stimuli like sound or light to influence your brainwave patterns.
So you're basically syncing your brain waves to a specific frequency.
Exactly. And by doing so, you can theoretically induce a desired mental state.
That sounds pretty futuristic.
It does, doesn't it? But there is some science to back it up.
Okay, so how does this relate to Dopamine Genius? Are they using brainwave entrainment to boost dopamine levels?
That's what they claim. But we have to be cautious here.
Why is that?
Because while brainwave entrainment is a real phenomenon, the research on its specific applications is still pretty limited.
Okay, so it's not like a proven method for increasing dopamine or anything like that.
Not exactly. There's some evidence that it might have some effects on mood and cognition, but the link to dopamine is still very speculative.
And even if it could influence dopamine, it's not clear whether those effects would be long-lasting or meaningful?
Exactly. We need more research to really understand the potential benefits and limitations of brainwave entrainment.
All right, so I'm hearing a lot of maybes and possibilities here. It sounds like the science is still pretty murky.
That's fair to say. I think it's important to approach this with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely. Yeah. But even if DopamineGenius doesn't live up to all of its hype, I'm still intrigued by this idea that sound can influence our brains.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating.
Like, think about how certain music can make you feel happy or sad, or how the sound of rain can be so calming.
Right. Sound has this incredible power to evoke emotions and alter our mental state.
So even if DopamineGenius isn't the magic bullet it claims to be, maybe it's still tapping into something real.
I think that's a good possibility.
And it makes me wonder about all the other ways that we could be using sound to improve our lives.
Yeah, there's so much potential there.
Like, what if we could use sound to reduce stress or improve sleep or even enhance creativity?
Those are all really interesting areas of exploration.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the science behind DopamineGenius, but I'm also curious about the practical side of things.
Like what?
Like, what does the program actually involve? What do you actually do?
Right. Let's get into the nitty-gritty.
So from what I can tell from their website, it's basically a series of audio tracks.
Yeah, that seems to be the core component.
And they claim that these tracks contain specific frequencies and rhythms that are designed to stimulate dopamine production.
But they don't really explain how that works, do they?
Nope. It's all very vague,
Yeah.
and I haven't been able to find any detailed information about the specific frequencies they're using.
That's a bit suspicious.
Right. Makes me wonder if they're just trying to keep their methods secret.
Or maybe they just don't want to reveal that there's not much substance behind their claims.
Oh, that's a possibility too.
So it sounds like we need to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, we need to find out what's really going on behind the scenes.
All right, let's put on our detective hats.
Okay, so what's our next step?
Well, I think we need to look beyond the marketing materials and see if we can find any independent research or reviews of DopamineGenius.
Good idea. Maybe we can track down some people who have actually tried the program and get their honest opinions.
And in the meantime, we can continue to explore the science of sound and the brain.
Yeah, there's still so much we don't know.
But that's what makes this so exciting.
Absolutely. The more we learn about the brain, the more possibilities open up.
So stay tuned. We're just getting started.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about the science and the claims, but I'm also curious about the practical applications of this whole dopamine and sound thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's all well and good to talk about the theory, but how can we actually use this knowledge in our lives?
Right, like what are the potential benefits beyond just, boosting productivity and focus?
Well, one area that's really interesting is music therapy.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. But how does it actually work?
So music therapy uses music to address physical, emotional, cognitive, and social needs of individuals. It's been used to help people with a wide range of conditions like anxiety, depression, autism, and even chronic pain.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So are they like listening to specific types of music, or is it more about the act of creating music?
It can be both. Sometimes it involves listening to pre-recorded music that's been chosen for its therapeutic qualities. Other times it might involve actively creating music through singing, playing instruments, or songwriting.
So it's not just about the sound itself. It's about how people engage with music and how it makes them feel.
Exactly. And it's not just limited to clinical settings either. Music can be a powerful tool for self-care and stress reduction for anyone.
That's true. I know, I always feel better after listening to some of my favorite music.
And what about in education? Have you ever thought about how sound could be used to enhance learning?
Not really. I guess I've always associated education with like visual aids and textbooks.
Yeah, that's the traditional approach. But there's a growing body of research that suggests that sound can play a significant role in learning as well.
Really? How so?
Well, for one thing, certain types of background music have been shown to improve focus and memory.
Oh, that's interesting. So like playing classical music while studying.
Yeah, exactly. There's also the concept of auditory learning, which is basically the idea that some people learn best through listening.
So like listening to audiobooks or podcasts instead of reading.
Exactly. And there are even programs that use sound to help people with dyslexia or other learning disabilities.
Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea sound could be so versatile.
It really is. And I
Yeah.
think we're only just scratching the surface of its potential.
This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes to the power of sound. It's so much more than just something we hear.
Right. It's a fundamental part of our experience, and it can have a profound impact on our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors.
No, even if DopamineGenius turns out to be a bust, I think this exploration has been incredibly valuable.
I agree. It's gotten us thinking about sound in new ways, and it's opened up all sorts of possibilities.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring the world of sound. Experiment with different soundscapes, pay attention to how sound affects you, and don't be afraid to think outside the box.
Maybe you'll discover a new way to boost your focus, enhance your creativity, or simply bring more joy and peace into your life.
And who knows? Maybe someday science will fully unlock the secrets of sound and its potential to transform our minds and bodies.
Until then, keep those ears open and those minds curious.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into dopamine genius. We've covered a lot of ground today, but I think we've just scratched the surface of this fascinating topic.
I agree, there's still so much to learn about the brain and the power of sound.
But as always, we encourage you to do your own research, think critically, and draw your own conclusions.
And if you have any thoughts or questions about what we've discussed today, please feel free to share them in the comments below.
We love hearing from you, and we always appreciate your feedback.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep listening. The world is full of wonders waiting to be discovered.
Thanks for joining us.